I'm Rod Chappell. Welcome to the Rod Chappell Show. It's great to be with you today, and today we've got an exciting program, one that will be the most important as we approach the November 8th, 2022 Election Day. If you don't have a plan to vote, get one. If you get to the polls and can't vote, use the phone number 866-RVOTE, 866-687-8683. Make sure that your voice is heard. In order to make that meaningful today, we have Sharon Jones from the Jones Advocacy Group, one of the best lobbyists in the region, who's going to share her insights on Amendment 1, Amendment 3, Amendment 4, Amendment 5, and the constitutional question, whatever that is. Lots of these things have, Amendment 3, for example, has 39 pages to it. There's a lot of detail. I'm proud to bring and sit with a distinct professional to give insights and opinions on what we should think about some of the words that are used in this language. Sharon Jones.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks for the kind words.
Hey.
I'm really glad to be here today. This is one of the longest ballots that we've seen in recent years, and it's a lot of complicated questions. So should we just dive in?
Let's do.
Okay. All right. So Amendment 1 is the first one.
Okay.
And that has to do with how the treasurer can invest extra state dollars. Not that we have a lot these days, but
right.
When we have a surplus, that money doesn't just sit in a savings account. The treasurer invests it in safe investments. Currently, our Constitution says the only safe investment is federal bearer bonds. So treasury bonds, things like that, but they're all issued by the federal government. This would allow the treasurer to invest in any investment the treasurer thinks is safe. Yeah, that's a lot of authority.
Yeah.
That's a lot of discretion that we are putting into one person, admittedly an elected official, but that's a lot of authority and discretion.
So one person can take our tax dollars and invest in Teletubbies?
If they think that is a reasonable, sound investment, yes, absolutely.
What if they lose the money?
Well, I guess that's a question to be answered later. I mean, they wouldn't have violated their constitutional duty. So we could really be in a spot, for sure.
Well, what if we had a treasurer that let his friend invest the money?
Well, yeah, again, we would be in a position where the money's gone. There's nothing we can do about that. And we may be in a position where our treasurer would be going to jail or not. Or the court might say, you had the authority, as long as you thought it was reasonable. And, as an attorney, the reasonable standard, is everything. Like,
right.
It is so standard that everything would be on the table because reasonable is so subjective.
Well, and so the limitation that they can only invest now with federal bonds, those are guaranteed, right?
They are. They are guaranteed by the federal government. It's one of the most stable, secure investments you can have. This opens the door completely wide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It also gives that same authority to the legislature. So not only is the person who we actually elect to safeguard our money going to have this discretion, but also the legislature can override the person we elected to do that job and make whatever laws they want. So that's even more terrifying to me as someone who likes fiscal responsibility in my government.
That's right.
That, the legislature could actually pass a law that says you can only invest in private companies that have the following kinds of boards or something, and our Constitution would allow that.
Wow. Well, that seems really. How did we get this? Where did this come from?
This one came from the legislature, funnily enough.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and there is one part of it that is reasonable, but the important thing to remember about all of these is you can't pick and choose which pieces you like. It's an all or nothing. So I think this originally started out as the treasurer said, I think I should be able to invest in municipal bonds and state bonds and other government bonds than just federal. And then it ballooned out into this, you can invest in anything you want.
Boy.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can all see the problems with that.
Yes. Yeah. It's got some issues.
Boy. Well, number one seems like a loser.
I'm voting no.
All right, all right.
The second one, so there is no Amendment 2.
Okay.
The way that the Secretary of State assigns numbers is when you turn in your signature gathering. And the person who turned in for Amendment 2 didn't make the signatures. So for those of you who are wondering why there's no Amendment 2, that's why.
That's why. Okay. Noted.
But on to Amendment 3, which is a huge one.
Okay.
So you may remember in 2018, we passed a medical marijuana constitutional amendment. That amendment had some, they weren't really limitations, but they act like limitations on the number of licenses that can be given out to companies, things like that. This provision takes that same market and says, we're going to do the exact same thing, we're just not going to require patient cards anymore. So it's being sold as opening up Missouri's market to adult use of recreational marijuana. What it actually is saying everyone who already has a license in this state can now sell cannabis to anyone, regardless of whether or not they have a patient card. So it's not really a good deal for folks who were hoping to get into the market, for sure.
Right. And there were almost 1,000 lawsuits that were filed related to the medical marijuana licensure. You know, many of those people complaining that the process wasn't fair, that, you know, minorities of all sorts were excluded from participation, that locations are not great. So it's just going to double down on that same...
Yeah, it's going to double down on the same market that we have now, but open it up to sales for people who, admittedly, it costs $200 to $300 to get a patient card. This will take that requirement out, which is admittedly a good thing, but it doesn't create new opportunities for dispensaries in your area. It doesn't create a cheaper product in your area by opening up more supply chain. It's the same market we have now. It just allows for people to buy without a patient card.
And tell me if I'm right about this. This is $1 billion industry.
Yeah, easily.
And so if you're not in it in terms of getting a license, then you will never have an opportunity. Is that about right?
That is about right, yeah. And just in case there may be those who think, oh, Sharon's overreacting. It actually says in the language that for 18 months, any new license that may be available cannot be issued to someone who doesn't already have a medical license. And going forward, even after that 18 months, if a new license becomes available, half of any new licenses have to go to people who are already in the industry. So this is protectionism, plain and simple.
This isn't fair at all.
No, it's not. Now, they've done something which is clever, and we've seen it done time and time again. They've put expungement in here, and I'm going to do air quotes around expungement. To try to get those of us who care about social justice, who care about criminal justice reform, that sort of thing, to bite on this idea of continuing the closed market. But they also put some things in there that make me think it's not actually going to happen.
Well, expungement, that's where they take a criminal conviction and they erase it off your record?
Supposedly, yes.
Yes. So
that's how expungement is supposed to work.
All right.
It's supposed to be, hey, you know, it's not that you weren't guilty of the crime, it's that we've decided that shouldn't have been a crime in the first place. Clean your record. Which should be a good thing, and it's something you and I have both worked on in the legislature, trying to get it passed. This one, however, won't happen unless the legislature passes it into the budget. And we're thinking it will be about $6 to $7 million a year to implement it.
Wait, so is the $6 to $7 billion implementation fee or money to do that, is that already in this Amendment 3?
No. The money is, but the authority to spend it is not. I know. It's tricky, which is why we're here. So if you wanted to pull it up and look on page 31, I believe, of the amendment, what it says is all these tax dollars are going to be divided up, and here's how they're going to be divided up. But when it gets to the expungement part, it says, as appropriated by the legislature, money can be spent to implement the expungement program. So if the legislature doesn't appropriate the money, even if it's sitting in a bank account with the expungement program's name on it, they can't spend a single dollar of it.
Well, how about this? Has the legislature appropriated anything close to $6 or $7 million for expungement in the past?
No. In fact, they have killed every attempt at any kind of expungement that we've done. Yeah. So I'm not terribly optimistic that they would do that. Now, in case you're thinking, well, maybe that's just something that's required. When we get down to the Veterans Fund part of the money from taxes going to help veterans, that's not subject to appropriation.
They funded the veterans because they wanted them to have the money right away.
Yep.
But the people who they promise expungement to under Amendment 3 don't have any promise of the money. And in fact, if you look at the history, you can almost know that the legislature is not going to do that.
Correct.
This is a bait and switch.
It is. It is. And that's not even getting into all the nitty-gritty kind of things that, as a policy mind, I'm looking at it and going, I'm not exactly sure this program's going to work, even if it were fully funded. The biggest problem is it doesn't happen at all without the funding.
Okay. Well, this is probably because the people who developed Amendment 3 are just grassroots activists, right? And they're not sophisticated? Is that what happened?
No, not at all. Yeah, the people who have been pushing and funding for Amendment 3 are the very same people who will keep their licenses. They're the people who are already operating in the state, as well as some of their parent companies in other states that are excited about continuing their foothold here in Missouri.
Boy, I tell you what, a foothold in the industry and their hand in the customer's pocket too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it's an industry paid for and designed bill written to tell people there's going to be expungement when there's really not.
Yep.
Any other tricks we should be thinking about?
There's the micro business licenses.
Oh, okay. What's that?
So it is being sold as a way to help Black and brown people get into the industry.
I have a question.
Yes?
How come we can't have a regular license?
Well, that's a really good question because they don't want you to.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because again, remember, the whole point of this is no new licenses. If you have a license today, you'll have a license after this passes, and nobody else gets one. That's the whole point of this. So there will be a total, we have 8 congressional districts.
Okay.
There are 2 in St. Louis and 1 in Kansas City.
Okay.
When you're looking at major metropolitan areas where we have a concentration of people who've been affected by the drug war,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So there will be a total of 18 new licenses, either, not both, either you can grow and manufacture or you can sell to consumers. 18 licenses in those congressional districts, total.
So you can grow and manufacture. So you can grow some cannabis and then turn that into some kind of a product.
Right.
But you can't sell it.
Right, and you can only grow 250 plants.
Well, isn't the current law about half
Yeah.
that you could do without, you can just do that at home right now?
If you are a caregiver and you've got a couple patients that you're growing for, you can grow 100 plants. Now, would you like to know how many plants the full license can grow?
I'm going to guess it's probably about 500.
Well, that would be an interesting guess. No, we don't actually know because they're not limited by plants. They're limited to 10,000 square feet of canopy space.
And if I'm thinking right, you could probably have a layer here, a layer there, and that just,
Really, if you are good at growing, you can have 30,000 square feet of plants. And a micro business can have 250.
Wow.
More importantly, if you get a micro business license, you can't do business with the full license holders. You can only do business with other micro businesses.
So if you're in the growing and manufacturing side, then you have to sell to one of the other micro grows, right? Or micro businesses who can then sell it.
Yes. 2 totally separate systems, industries.
Looks like 2 different markets.
It is. It's
Yeah.
two different markets.
Yeah.
And one of them is designed to be much less profitable than the other.
Right, right. No, it doesn't escape me that the whole reason for the legalization of marijuana, of course, there are folks who want to use it, and that's up to them, personal choice, but to eliminate the disparities in law enforcement with the overcriminalization of a minor crime that has affected so many black and brown populations in so many of our communities here in Missouri, even rural as well.
Yeah.
Does this Amendment 3 do anything to address that?
It says that if you are an individual, you can have a total of 3 ounces of dried flower on you at any one time. That's not a lot for people who have never really used cannabis and don't understand. That's like 3 cigarettes worth.
So you can have 3 cigarettes worth of marijuana?
Somewhere between 3 and 6, depending, but
How they look or
less
whatever.
than a full pack of cigarettes.
You can have that and not go to jail?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what over 3?
If you're over 3, depending on how many times they've decided to stop and check.
But wait, some of us get stopped a lot more than everybody else.
Yes, that has not escaped my notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's anywhere from fines up to a misdemeanor, which can include jail time based on how this is written. So, and if you are, if you get to a point where you've got more than twice that amount, then they can say, we don't just think this is possession, we think that you're operating illegally.
So if you have a full pack of marijuana cigarettes, all of a sudden you've got an illegal operation that's going on.
Potentially, yes. Yeah.
Or you could at least be charged.
Yes.
It'd be up to the jury.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it depends on who your prosecutor is. But even currently, there are people who are 1 or 2 plants over caregiver number or their personal grow number under the medical system, and they are getting everything seized, their house raided, and going to jail, and having to fight that, even though they have all the correct licenses, just because, and for anyone who's ever gardened, just because one plant too many goes into flower at the wrong time, and then you're stuck. Or you've had a bumper crop of a year, and then you're stuck. So this doesn't, it doesn't open the door to say, as long as you're trying your best, you're good. It opens the door to, now you've told DHSS, the Department of Health and Senior Services, that you are growing marijuana.
Oh, because you have to report it.
Yes, because you have to sign up and get a license to personal grow. And you've told them where you live. And you've also given all of that information to the Highway Patrol.
It sounds like I've got the government and law enforcement with free reign to come into my house.
Now, would you like to hear the kicker?
There's more?
There's more.
Okay.
So I've talked to some people who've said, well, Sharon, it doesn't really matter what we pass. In less than 5 years, the federal government's going to call it legal and make it all fine, and then we'll be able to go forward, and it won't even matter what's in our Constitution. They've actually put a clause in here that says our state constitutional provisions will prevail even after federal legalization. So it will not matter if the federal government says, we're all good here, this is just like, tomatoes or any, your herb garden or whatever, won't matter in Missouri. We'll still be under this same very restrictive standard.
So this would lock in the fat cat medical marijuana license holders forever.
Yes. Yeah.
And not even give the people what they want.
No. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we have seen, repeatedly that the regulators over this market have no desire to open it up, have no desire to make things more available. They are keeping as tight a control on this as they possibly can. And by doing that, they really are hurting the folks who want to be legal, who don't want to be operating in a gray market or an illicit market or something like that. They want to be doing the right thing. We're making it harder and harder for them to do that and more expensive.
Right. Well, and I've heard this argument. that we got to do something now, right? Because, you know, the legislature's not going to act next year on this, the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
What about that?
That could very well be, but here's the thing. If we take this deal, we are locking ourselves in forever to a very closed market with a very expensive product. The only way these provisions could change is another vote of the people. So it's not like we could pass this and then the legislature could come back and fix some of the things and mess around the corners. No. Any change to this language has to go back through a vote of the people.
Because this is going in the Constitution, right?
Correct.
Now, we're going to add a crime to the Constitution when we were trying to get rid of the criminalization of marijuana possession.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to know about Amendment 3?
I think that's it. You know, when I first started looking at it, I thought this is kind of a toss-up. There's some good, there's some bad. And the more I read it and the more I got into the details and the fine print, the more I'm like, the trade-off isn't there. It's really not. The micro businesses and the expungement, which are the two things that are of great interest, really are illusory. They're imaginary.
Right.
Illusory is the legal term. They don't do what they're said to do. And to me, that means I'm going to be a no.
Boy. Yeah. Say no to the bait and switch. All right. So that's 3.
That's 3.
What about Amendment 4?
Amendment 4 is the other one that really kind of gets my hackles up a bit, if that's okay to say.
Yeah, I think it's public television, but we're going to give you a little latitude.
No, it's about Kansas City police funding. And what it does is, you may remember a couple years ago, the mayor of Kansas City said, hey, Kansas City Police Department, I am going to give you your base funding level, and then any dollar over that you want, you have to come to city council just like every other agency and ask for.
Okay.
This is the only way that the Kansas City City Council can have any control over their police, because the Kansas City police force isn't run by them. Yeah. Every other police force in Missouri is run by their local government. Kansas City's is run by a state board.
Now, why is that?
It goes back to the days when there was segregation and corruption, and the state decided that they didn't like the way that Kansas City was running their business, and so they took it away from them.
And it's still that way?
It's still that way today.
Well, Kansas City is one of the second highest murder city with violent homicides and crimes in the state.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like their management is going that great for Kansas City.
It's not. And there is nothing that the people who actually live there and run the rest of the government can do about it, which is why Mayor Lucas said, I want to have some say over how all these discretionary funds are spent. Because if discretionary funds are spent on new military equipment for the police force, that's not going to fix our crime problem. That's just giving them new, not to be overly dismissive, but new toys that they can play with when we have severe incidents. But severe incidents, someone taking over City Hall or the courthouse or something, aren't an everyday occurrence. People getting shot in the street is. And those solutions don't look like new SWAT vans. Those solutions look like higher salaries so that you get a more professional police force, or community service models where you actually go in and try to stop those crimes from happening by engaging with the community ahead of time. So the legislature decided that that wasn't okay. They didn't like the fact that the city council, and it wasn't just the mayor, by the way, it was the entire city council. They didn't like the fact that city council wanted some accountability for their own police force. So they said no. Instead of 20% minimum, which is in our current statute, we're going to do 25% of the Kansas City overall budget has to go to the police with no say over how it's spent. It's just a blank check. Here you go.
Wow.
Yeah. they passed the law, and then they thought, you know, those folks over there in Kansas City are getting pretty smart. They might sue us over this and say it's an unconstitutional overreach.
Right.
So we're going to put it in the Constitution, too.
Good grief. And that's where this one came from.
And that's where this one came from. This is another one that came from our legislature where they are trying to justify laws they've already passed.
Now, so when I was reading Amendment 4, and I just gave it a quick glance, maybe I didn't read it real good, but I didn't see this is where the state's in charge of Kansas City police and Kansas Cityans don't get a say in how their money's spent, Bill.
Correct. It's written to just say, let's see, I've got it right here, to say minimum funding for a police force established by a state board of police commissioners.
Well, see, I read that and I think, well, that applies here in Jeff City.
It does not. The only force that is run by the State Board of Police Commissioners is Kansas City. Period. Everyone else gets what's called a post commission,
Yes.
which is training and certification and that sort of thing. But they are not controlled by that State Board of Police Commissioners. They are only certified that they've completed their training. Kansas City is actually run by them. They cannot make a move without going through the State Board of Police Commissioners.
I wonder what that State Board of Police Commissioner budget looks like.
I don't know the answer to that one, but it would be very interesting.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting.
Well, the idea that you would have folks who live in a community and can't, talk to their local police department meaningfully, right? Whether that's the elected politicians, the mayor, the city council, or Joe Schmo citizen that's just paying their taxes.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like democracy.
It's not. It's not. It's the state taking away local control. And here's the thing, Rod. Right now, today, we're talking about Kansas City.
Right.
But our state legislature has shown time and time again they want to do it there. They don't like what St. Louis is doing. They don't like what Springfield is doing. They don't like what Columbia is doing.
Right.
They're going into these places where they think, hey, local government, we don't like the way you're making decisions, and so we're going to take away your authority.
This is another power grab.
It is. It is. It's our state legislature thinking they know what's best for us, even though we've elected local people who know our community to make other decisions.
Well, tell us about this constitutional question. Something's got to get better.
Well, at least this one doesn't have any authority behind it, really.
Okay.
Like this wasn't done by the legislature. It wasn't done by big moneyed interest.
Okay.
This is automatically put on our ballot every 20 years. It's something that in 1942, I believe, when we had our last constitutional convention and put this constitution into place, includes this provision. And it says every 20 years, you just have to go to the people and say, hey, is this working for you? Or do you want us to start all over from scratch? Yeah. And I think, it's a fairly benign question. It's not particularly harmful in and of itself. But in our current environment, if we threw out the entire Constitution and started over and said, well, what provision do you think, and what provision do you think, and blah, 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 we'd have a mess on our hands. We can't agree on how to spend free money from the federal government to make our state better.
Yes.
Much less on what our fundamental rights should be in the state. So I think, maybe 20 years ago it would have been fine and hey, we could have worked it out and had some rational conversations.
Yeah.
Not in today's environment for sure.
It sounds like you're a no on that one too.
I am. I'm going to end up a no on all of these, I think.
Yes. Well, I can let the cat out of the bag, Sharon. The Missouri State Conference of the NAACP recently came forward and decided that it was voting no and recommending that all the citizens do that too on Amendment 1, Amendment 3, Amendment 4, and this constitutional question. The idea that big money and fat cat politicians are not just going to say where our tax dollars go, but to eliminate safeguards for the public, and at the same time leave communities like Kansas City, and only Kansas City, less safe, as part of some power grab. That's distressing. And so I understand the position on the constitutional question.
Yeah.
If people wanted to read the language for themselves, where should they go?
You can go to the Secretary of State's website. They've got a whole section on the ballot initiatives, and it's got the ones that are approved for the ballot. You can look at the title that you're going to see on your ballot, as well as all the fine print that is actually going to be going into our Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. It's been great.
Absolutely. Can't tell you how much we appreciate Sharon Jones from the Jones Advocacy Group being with us today on the Rod Chapel Show. We try to bring information that's going to help the working families of Missouri, the voters, the citizens, the people who make everyday life matter in the communities and the families that we love and live in. Here we see a bunch of issues that have been provided to us not by engaged citizens, but rather by political interest, whether it's the treasurer or the legislature, by fat cats who control the drug monopoly that is the cannabis industry in Missouri as it sits now, that want to prevent anyone else from getting in. We see that promises are made and not being kept. We see that the language that's being provided doesn't really do what they say it does. It's the analysis that we brought to you today through Sharon Jones and that have come forward from the communities that we serve. That's the issues that we need to pay attention to when it comes to November 8th. Be sure and go to the polls. Now, whether you look at the NAACP scorecard on these amendments, or you look at some of the independent analysis that's gone forward out of Kansas City or St. Louis, you listen to their mayors and say, not right for my community, or you listen to the groups that are going to be left out, or even taxpayers whose money is going to be spent in a way that they don't approve or have any say over. Make sure that you're informed on the issues. If you have a problem voting, call the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition at 866-RVOTE. That is 866-687-8683. And make sure that your voice is heard. Thanks for being with us on the Rod Chapel Show.